I still remember the first day I saw her sitting alone at the far end of the massive school garden, surrounded by silence thicker than the morning fog. Everyone said she was the billionaire's daughter who hadn't spoken a word since her mother's death 3 years ago. They called her strange, haunted, cursed even. But to me, she looked like someone who was simply lost in a world too loud for her broken heart. My name is Emma, and I was just an ordinary scholarship student trying to survive among the rich and cruel. The academy was ruthless, filled with gossiping daughters of elites who thrived on mocking those beneath them. I was often their favorite target, the charity case they loved to humiliate. But that day, something about her silence drew me in. Her name was Alina Blackwood. Her father, Richard Blackwood, was one of the wealthiest men in the country, feared, admired, and rumored to control everything in the city. People said his daughter's silence was punishment from fate for the sins of the Blackwood family. I didn't believe in curses, but there was something undeniably eerie about the mansion car that picked her up every afternoon, its tinted windows reflecting nothing but emptiness. On my second week, I saw her being cornered by a group of girls near the fountain. They were mocking her for not responding, laughing cruelly as one of them splashed water on her dress. Something inside me snapped. "Stop it!" I shouted, stepping forward before I could think. The laughter stopped. Everyone turned to look at me, the poor girl standing up for the billionaire's silent daughter. The bullies smirked and walked away, whispering things I couldn't quite hear. Alina looked at me with wide, glassy eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, for the first time, I heard a voice so soft I almost thought I imagined it. "Thank you," she whispered. I froze. My heart pounded in disbelief. No one had heard her speak in years, and yet she had just spoken to me. From that day on, everything changed. What started as a simple act of kindness would soon unravel a secret so dark, so terrifying, that it would shake the entire Blackwood empire and destroy the meaning of trust forever. After that day, Alina began to sit next to me during lunch, her quiet presence making everyone stare and whisper. I didn't mind. There was something fragile about her, like a bird that had forgotten how to fly. She rarely spoke, but her eyes said more than words ever could. Sometimes she'd write small notes instead of talking little questions like, "Do you like the rain?" Or "Why do people hate silence?" I'd always answer with honesty, and she'd smile faintly, as if trying to remember how happiness felt. One afternoon, while we sat under the old oak tree behind the school, I asked her why she never talked to anyone else. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote, "They listen, but they don't hear." I wanted to ask more, but before I could, a tall man in a black suit appeared out of nowhere. "Miss Blackwood, your father is waiting," he said sternly. Alina's face drained of color. She stood up quickly, her body tense like a trapped animal, and followed him without a word. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the fear in her eyes. Why was she so terrified of her own father? The next morning, Alina didn't show up at school. Not that day or the next. Whispers began circulating that she'd been sent away again, something about behavioral treatment. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. On the third day, I received a letter slipped inside my locker. No name, no handwriting I recognized, just a faint scent of lavender, the same perfume Alina always wore. My hands shook as I unfolded the note. It said only 3 words. Don't trust him. I didn't know who him was, but I could feel my stomach twist with dread. That night, a black car parked outside my small apartment. I watched from the window as a man in a suit looked up toward my floor, his face expressionless. He stood there for a few minutes before driving off into the dark. My heart pounded. Why would someone from the Blackwood family come here? I didn't realize it then, but I had just stepped into a secret far bigger than friendship. And soon I would discover that Alina's silence wasn't by choice, it was survival. The following week felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Everywhere I turned, I sensed eyes watching me, shadows moving just a little too long after I passed. I told myself it was paranoia until one evening after class when I found my locker wide open, everything inside scattered. But it wasn't the mess that scared me, it was the single photo left taped to the locker door. It was of me and Alina sitting under the oak tree smiling. The picture had been taken from a distance, clearly without our knowledge. On the back, written in jagged handwriting, were the words, "Stay away from her." My breath caught in my throat. I ripped the photo down, my hands trembling, my heart racing so hard it hurt. I tried calling the school counselor, but before I could, I received a text from an unknown number. "You're being watched, Emma. Don't dig where you shouldn't." I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, clutching the letter Alina had sent, reading those 3 haunting words again and again. Don't trust him. Who was him? Her father? The driver? Someone else entirely? The next day I decided to find out. After classes, I followed the same black car I had seen before, careful to stay far behind. It drove through the city and into the hills, stopping in front of the Blackwood Estate, a mansion so large it looked more like a fortress. High walls, iron gates, guards at every corner. I hid behind a row of trees watching. Then I saw her, Alina. She was standing on the balcony wearing a pale blue dress, staring out at nothing. Her expression was hollow, lifeless. When she turned her head slightly, I noticed something bruises on her neck, faint but visible. My blood ran cold. She wasn't being treated. She was being controlled. Just as I was about to leave, one of the guards spotted me. "Hey, who's there?" he shouted. Panic surged through me. I ran, tripping over roots, branches tearing at my clothes, my lungs burning. Somehow I made it back to the main road and caught a bus home. As I sat trembling in the last row, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening inside that mansion, Alina needed help, and I was the only one who cared enough to find the truth. The next morning, I couldn't focus in class. Every sound made me flinch, the click of a pen, the shuffle of footsteps behind me. I kept replaying the image of those bruises on Alina's neck. Something inside me refused to stay quiet any longer. During lunch, I approached Mrs. Collins, our homeroom teacher, the only adult I half trusted. "Ma'am, I think something's wrong with Alina Blackwood," I whispered. She frowned, glancing around nervously before leaning closer. "Emma, that's a serious accusation. You don't want to get involved with that family." "But she's in danger," I protested, my voice trembling. Mrs. Collins sighed heavily and lowered her tone. "Listen to me. The Blackwoods own this school. People who dig into their business disappear. Do yourself a favor, forget about her." Her words chilled me to the core, but they only strengthened my resolve. That night, I searched online for anything I could find about the Blackwoods. Most of the results were polished interviews and charity events, pictures of Richard Blackwood smiling beside powerful politicians. But then, buried deep on an old blog, I found something strange, a post from an anonymous former employee, claiming that Blackwood Manor hides more than gold. The blog mentioned a forbidden wing and a daughter kept in silence by design. My hands shook as I read it. Could this be true? Was Alina being silenced literally for knowing something she shouldn't? The next day I made a plan. I'd sneak onto the Blackwood property after dark. My heart hammered just thinking about it. But fear couldn't stop me now. If Alina was trapped, I had to see for myself. That evening, armed with only a flashlight and my phone, I walked through the forest behind the mansion. The air was thick with mist, the night eerily quiet except for the rustling of leaves under my feet. I found a section of the fence that looked climbable and pulled myself over, my palms scraping against the cold metal. As I crept closer to the mansion, I saw lights flickering in one of the upper windows of Alina's room. She was pacing back and forth, her silhouette restless and frantic. Suddenly, a shadow moved behind her, tall, dark, unmistakably male. My breath hitched. Whoever it was, he grabbed her arm roughly, and I heard her muffled cry through the glass. I wanted to scream, but fear rooted me in place. Whatever was happening inside those walls was far worse than I had imagined. I crouched behind a tree, frozen, watching that horrific scene unfold through the window. My mind screamed to do something, but my body refused to move. The man, tall and broad-shouldered, was shouting at Alina, though I couldn't hear the words. She shook her head, terrified, trying to pull away. Then, he raised his hand, and for a split second, I thought he was going to hit her, but he stopped when a woman entered the room. Her presence was cold, commanding, and the man immediately backed away. The woman's face came into view, illuminated by the light, and my blood turned to ice. It was Mrs. Collins, my teacher. I nearly gasped out loud. What was she doing there? She placed a hand on Alina's shoulder and whispered something before leading her out of the room. My thoughts were spinning. Was Mrs. Collins working for the Blackwoods all along? I felt sick, realizing she had warned me not to get involved only to cover her own tracks. I needed proof, something to expose what was going on inside that mansion. I crept along the side of the building, searching for another way in. Near the back, I found a half-open door that led into what looked like a storage basement. My heart pounded as I slipped inside. The air was cold and damp, filled with the faint scent of bleach and old metal. I switched on my flashlight and scanned the room boxes, crates, and thick chains bolted to the wall. My breath caught. Why would a family need chains in their basement? Then I heard soft crying coming from behind a metal door. I tiptoed closer, pressing my ear against it. The sound was unmistakable. It was Alina. My pulse raced as I whispered, "Alina, it's me, Emma." The crying stopped, replaced by silence. Then a trembling voice said, "You shouldn't have come." Before I could reply, footsteps echoed from above fast, heavy and getting closer. Panic surged through me. I darted behind a pile of crates just as the door burst open. A man in a black uniform entered holding a flashlight. He scanned the room slowly, the beam passing inches from my face. "She's not here," he muttered into a radio. "Check the perimeter." As soon as he left, I exhaled shakily, tears burning my eyes. I had found Alina, but freeing her would mean going up against people powerful enough to destroy me. I waited until the footsteps faded completely before crawling out from behind the crates. My whole body was shaking, but I knew I couldn't leave her there. "Alina," I whispered again through the metal door. "I'm getting you out." There was a pause. Then her trembling voice answered, "The key. It's in the security room, down the hall." I glanced toward the dimly lit corridor, every instinct in me screaming to run away, but I forced myself forward. The hall was lined with old portraits of stern-looking Blackwoods, their painted eyes seeming to follow me as I crept past. The deeper I went, the colder it became. At the end of the hall, I found a door slightly ajar with monitors flickering inside. It was the security control room. Dozens of screens showed every corner of the mansion, and there on one of them was Alina, curled up on the floor of her locked room. I spotted the key hanging on a hook near the desk. Just as I reached for it, I heard a voice behind me. "I warned you to stay out of this, Emma." I spun around, heart pounding. It was Mrs. Collins, her expression calm, but her eyes dark with menace. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. She sighed, almost pitying. "You don't understand, child. Mr. Blackwood protects his family's legacy, and Alina, she knows something she shouldn't. Her silence keeps everyone safe." "Safe?" I spat. "You're keeping her prisoner." She stepped closer, her tone icy. "You think the world would be kind if it knew the truth? That girl's silence keeps empires from collapsing." She reached out a hand. "Give me the key, Emma. Walk away before it's too late." My fingers tightened around the key as I shook my head. "No." For a moment her calm mask cracked, revealing something twisted beneath. "Then you'll regret this," she hissed. I bolted past her, sprinting down the hall with adrenaline surging through my veins. She shouted behind me, but I didn't stop. I reached Alina's door, jammed the key into the lock, and yanked it open. She stared at me in disbelief, tears streaming down her face. "We have to go," I whispered urgently, grabbing her hand. For the first time, she didn't hesitate. Together, we ran toward the exit, unaware that escaping the mansion was only the beginning of the nightmare. We ran through the long corridor, the echoes of our footsteps bouncing off the marble walls like the pounding of our hearts. Alina was shaking violently, but she held my hand so tightly it hurt. Behind us, alarms began to blare, the shrill sound slicing through the night. "They know," she gasped, her voice cracking. "Keep running!" I shouted, pulling her toward the service door that led to the garden. We burst outside into the cold night air, the moonlight spilling over the manicured hedges and fountains. I could see the main gate in the distance, but 2 guards were already sprinting toward us, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "This way," I whispered, dragging Alina toward the forest behind the mansion. Branches whipped at our faces as we stumbled through the trees, our breath coming in ragged gasps. Somewhere behind us, voices shouted orders and dogs barked. My chest ached, my legs burned, but fear drove me forward. When we finally stopped to catch our breath, Alina clung to me, trembling uncontrollably. "He'll never let us go," she whispered. "He'll find us." I cupped her face gently. "We'll make it. I promise." But deep down even I wasn't sure. We kept moving until we reached the edge of the woods, where an old road cut through the hills. A single car approached, its headlights glaring. I waved frantically. The driver, an older man in a delivery uniform, slowed down, confusion written on his face. "Please," I begged, "we need help." He hesitated for a moment before unlocking the doors. We climbed in just as the distant sounds of barking grew louder. The man didn't ask questions, he just drove. Only when the mansion lights disappeared behind us did Alina finally speak again, her voice barely audible. "I know why my father keeps me silent," she said, staring out the window. "He killed my mother." The words hung heavy in the air, stealing my breath. "What?" I whispered, my heart twisting. "He pushed her down the stairs," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I saw it. He told everyone she slipped. He said if I ever spoke, he'd do the same to me." I felt numb, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about control, it was about covering up a murder. And now that Alina had escaped, her father would do anything to silence both of us for good. The old man dropped us off near an abandoned bus stop on the outskirts of the city, refusing to take any money, just whispering, "Whatever trouble you're in, stay hidden." Then he drove away, leaving us standing under the flickering yellow light. Alina wrapped her arms around herself, shivering from more than just the cold. I pulled off my jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "We'll go to the police," I said firmly, though a part of me already doubted they would help. People like Richard Blackwood didn't answer to the law, they owned it. Still, we had to try. We walked for nearly an hour until we found a small police station, the kind that looked like it hadn't seen real action in years. Inside, a weary-looking officer raised an eyebrow as I stumbled through our story, how Alina had been kept prisoner, how her father had killed her mother. But the moment I said the name Blackwood, the officer's expression changed. His jaw tightened, his eyes darted to the security camera in the corner. "Miss, I think you should go home," he said slowly. "You don't want to make accusations like that? She's telling the truth." I shouted, pointing to Alina. "Look at her, she's terrified." But he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Please," he said under his breath. "For your own safety, leave now." Before I could argue, 2 men in suits walked in. They didn't look like cops. "Miss Emma Hayes?" one asked politely, flashing an ID that looked too perfect to be real. "We've been sent to escort you both to a safe location. Mr. Blackwood is worried." Alina's grip tightened around my arm. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. I turned to the officer for help, but he'd already looked away. That's when I knew we were trapped. The men stepped closer, their smiles fading. Let's not make this difficult. Without thinking, I grabbed Alina's hand and bolted for the back door. Shouts erupted behind us, footsteps pounding, but adrenaline carried us forward. We ran through narrow streets, turning corner after corner, until the city lights disappeared into darkness. We finally collapsed behind a row of dumpsters, gasping for air. "He owns everything," Alina sobbed, "even the police." My hands shook as I brushed tears from my face. "Then we'll go somewhere he can't reach us," I said. But even as I said it, I could feel it. Richard Blackwood was already closing in. We hid in an old warehouse near the river, our breaths turning to mist in the freezing air. It smelled of rust and oil, but at least it was quiet, away from the reach of the Blackwoods. I found some torn blankets and wrapped them around Alina, who sat huddled against the wall, her eyes wide and haunted. "He'll never stop," she whispered again and again. "He always finds me." I knelt beside her, forcing my voice to stay steady. "We just need proof, something to expose him. Once the truth is out, he can't hide anymore." She shook her head violently. "He destroyed everything. My mother tried to tell people too. And he made her disappear." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Still, I couldn't give up. I pulled out my phone, searching through the photos I'd taken inside the mansion earlier. One image made my stomach twist, the chains in the basement clear as day. "This is enough to start something," I said, showing it to her. But before she could respond, a low rumble echoed outside. Headlights flashed through the broken windows. My heart leapt into my throat. "They found us," I breathed. We ducked behind a stack of crates as footsteps crunched against gravel outside. The warehouse door creaked open, and the beam of a flashlight swept across the floor. Voices murmured and searching, moving closer. Alina's hand gripped mine so tightly it hurt. My mind raced for an escape. Then I saw Ida's small side door partially hidden behind machinery. I pointed toward it, and we crept silently, every movement slow and deliberate. Just as I reached for the handle, a voice shouted, "Stop right there!" The flashlight beam caught us, and instinct took over. I shoved the door open, and we ran into the night. Bullets shattered glass behind us as we sprinted down the riverside road, the freezing wind slicing across our faces. A black SUV roared to life somewhere behind us, its tires screeching. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but the sound of the engine growing closer pushed me harder. Then, from nowhere, a blinding set of lights appeared ahead, a delivery truck speeding through the intersection. I yanked Alina back just in time as the SUV swerved to avoid the crash, skidding off the road and slamming into a concrete barrier. For a moment, silence. We stood frozen, trembling, hearts racing. Maybe, just maybe, we had one more chance to survive the night. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the hissing of the SUV's crushed engine and the pounding of my heartbeat in my ears. Smoke rose from the wreck and the smell of burning fuel filled the air. "We have to go," I whispered, tugging Alina's hand. But she stood still, staring at the wreckage with wide, tear-filled eyes. "It's him," she said shakily. "That's my father's car." My stomach dropped. I looked closer through the shattered windshield, and there he was, Richard Blackwood himself, slumped over the steering wheel, his face pale and blood streaking down his forehead. Before I could react, his eyes opened, locking onto us. Even injured, his presence was terrifying. "Alina," he rasped, his voice echoing in the cold night. "Come here now." Alina froze, torn between fear and disbelief. "Don't," I said firmly, stepping in front of her. "You've hurt her enough." He gave a weak, chilling laugh. "You think you can save her? You have no idea what she's done." I frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" He coughed, his breath shallow. "Your mother didn't die by my hand, Alina. You pushed her." The world seemed to tilt. Alina staggered backward, shaking her head violently. "No, he's lying." I turned to her, but her face had gone completely pale. "He said it was an accident," she whispered. "He said I fell." Her words broke off in sobs. Blackwood smirked faintly. She blamed me to ease her guilt. I kept her silent to protect her. I didn't know what to believe. Could a man like him ever tell the truth? He reached a trembling hand toward Alina, but before she could move, the car let out a sharp crackling noise, the fuel leaking toward the flames. "Emma," I shouted, "we have to go!" I grabbed her arm and dragged her back as the car exploded, a burst of heat knocking us off our feet. The impact left my ears ringing, but through the haze, I saw Alina staring into the fire, whispering something I couldn't hear. We stumbled away as sirens wailed in the distance. Later, the police ruled it an accident, Richard Blackwood dead, his empire under investigation. Alina refused to speak of what really happened that night, and maybe that was for the best. Some truths are too heavy to carry. She left the city soon after, and I never saw her again. But sometimes when I pass the old school garden, I swear I can still hear her soft voice saying, "Thank you."